figuring out what do you love about what you do? Like what makes you passionate about it? What's your why that's bigger than you? And how can you lean into enjoying the process of it, not just the outcomes? Like you have to enjoy the actions you're taking or you're going to be miserable, and you might as well do something else that's way less pressure.
Hey Jen, welcome back to On Your Terms.
Hey Sam, I'm happy to be here.
You are my first repeat guest, and also it does not surprise me at all that my first repeat guest is you, and I'm very happy about that.
I'm so honored.
Yeah.
Any You're chance right. I get to chat with you, I'm so excited. So I'm very honored to be the first repeat.
Yeah, the first repeat. I'm very proud. And so to give everybody kind of an idea here of what Jen and I are going to be talking about today. So if you've listened to this podcast or like ever read an email of mine, then you probably already know that Jen's my mindset coach because I talk about her constantly, but and like constantly say how much I love her. But she, like her and I were talking before about how we've been working together now for years, and we were like, it was cool this promotion, the promotion that I just ran in February, to see like the real world, real-time application of a lot of things that you and I have been working on for a very long time. And I saw a difference in like myself. And then it was also like the first time I had, employees and team and all of these things to kind of run, and seeing like how my own mindset then started to trickle down and had sets the tone. So you and I decided that we were going to chat today and hopefully help everybody to understand like what are some of these big picture CEO mindset things that you've been working on with me, that some of which are getting better, some I'm still working on, and that we really saw some improvement in this time around, right?
Yeah, I love this idea because it takes what can often feel intangible. Like sometimes the mindset work can feel really intangible. And we think about, when we're diving into inner child or we're looking at shadow work, it's like, how does this connect to my business? How do I apply this in life? And so it's really fun that after you've been doing the work consistently, that it just clicks. You kind of see in real life, like, oh, this is the result. This is the outcome of all of this effort I've been putting into this one particular area. And I particularly love, especially debriefing after the launch you just had. And I definitely could see a difference, but I'm excited to hear what you noticed within yourself too.
Yeah. I would say, the first thing that I noticed going into this launch, and I know I had been telling you this for months, but I kept saying to you in November, December, and this for everybody to remember, the launch that we're talking about happened from about February 8th to like February 23rd. And starting next week on the podcast, we're going to have a 4-part series where I break down this launch. So this was about a $300,000 launch in about a week. And it was very big, had about 3,000 people sign up for the live webinar, and then a lot of purchases, all this kind of stuff. So it went very well. But I remember telling you back in November, December, Jen, this is going to be big. We're going to do this thing and I think it's going to be big. Do you remember?
I do. Yeah. And I love that, obviously that belief and just the knowledge. And what I find really inspiring about it is that while you knew, I know this is going to be big, it wasn't like, oh, I hope it's big. It better be big. It needs to be big. There wasn't this fear or this pressure around it. There was so much more excitement and trust that you can trust your team. You trust the work you've put in. You've been taking action consistently. You've set yourself up really beautifully. So it was a lot of grounded, genuine confidence in that moment. And so, of course, when you told me that, I have no doubt that it's going to be big, but it's really fun to see that play out, months in advance. And then even having, facing obstacles in the launch, it still turned out really incredibly well.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things at this point in business is I kind of understand what levers to pull to make certain things happen. And so I get a good feeling for when we were planning and designing this launch, which by the way, in next week's episode, in part 1 of the launch series, everyone's going to hear about exactly how I planned it and how we sat down and reverse engineered it and what the strategy was for it. But in doing that, you start to get a good feel for this one's going to work. Cause I also understand what makes these launches work really well. And that's what I'm excited to dive into about in the series.
Yeah.
But I feel a lot of the work you and I have done though too, is around this idea that while on the one hand, I was very excited about it. And I think that kind of enthusiasm and momentum really helps. I don't also tie, or at least I don't feel like I tie myself as much to it at the same time anymore. Whereas like when we started working together, I think my emotions were maybe more controlled by like how well or not well things were going.
Yes, that was one area of change that I noticed. I remember when we first started working together, um, there was you'd had a lot of success already, and yet there was still fear. There was still the sense of scarcity. I remember you saying like it could all go away,
Mm,
and the rug could be pulled out from under me. And while yeah, sure, there's always the risk of that. It's different when you're living in fear of that and you're using that fear to motivate you to act, and just the difference in the way that you are approaching the launch. That was so much more what I would say like open-handed in this one, whereas before it was very like there I could sense constriction
mm.
and just a lot more fear, and not necessarily maybe your worth in it, but just a lot of pressure on yourself that's not actually helpful.
Yeah. I think, I would love your insights on like what happened to make it so that launches actually became really fun. And no, it's not because they've always been really successful. Because I've actually had some along the last couple of years that they're always, I will be honest about the fact that they're always like quote unquote successful on paper. Like they're profitable, they work, but some
Yeah.
have like not gone as I hoped or not gone as planned, or we had like major things hop off. But like there's something about going into these launches and actually having fun. Lindsay, my director of operations, was just saying the other day, like, she's done so many launches and did so many before she came to my company. And she was like, but there's just something about the way we do it that's fun. And it's like not a lot of stress. And like that has to help, right? I would
Oh,
think.
yes, it does. I think sometimes we get addicted to stress as a way to
Mm,
motivate ourselves, and it can be effective, but it doesn't allow us to enjoy it. And so that's something that is a pattern that we have to unlearn a lot of times. We pick things up when we're really young. And so I think really for you, there's a lot of things at play with being able to not only take that pressure off of yourself, but also lead your team in a way that wasn't, pressurized. And that is, really leaning into, first off, the idea that you're safe and even if the worst case scenario happened, you have so many strengths, tools that no one can take away from you that would allow you to rebuild. So there's really this, you shift where you find your confidence from your outcomes and more into like what you innately have and what you can cultivate. And so, that was one thing I think we worked on a lot, was not just, focusing on the results that, hey, you have so much proof that you're successful and that you can trust that, but you have so many skills that have led to that success that despite the outcome, you can rely on those no matter what.
mm.
And
Yeah. I think people like accidentally think it's about having this like confidence that it's going to work out. Like even what I was saying when I started, like, hey, I think this is going to be really big. It wasn't even this confidence of like, everything I do touches to gold. Like it's not this kind of like cockiness. It's actually, to me at least, it feels like the confidence that I feel like I have now versus
Mhm.
especially when we start working together is that I have the confidence that I will figure things out, not necessarily that
Yes.
everything will work out or like, well,
Yeah.
it will work out because I'll figure it out, but like not necessarily everything will go smoothly from the start. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about there is growth mindset, genuinely,
Mm,
is this idea that you have a healthy sense of detachment from your outcomes. Like, yes, you care about them, but they are not your sole focus. They are not connected to your worth, but you're detached from things that you can't control totally. And you're looking at the process. You're looking at what can I learn? And I remember one thing you told me when we started working together was that you highly value curiosity. And so utilizing that value and making sure it is weaved into everything you do, which is huge. And it actually takes vulnerability to be curious. Whereas, if we were thinking about, I've already built all this, like I'm amazing, everything I touch turns to gold. Like in my mind, I'm like, that would be maybe surface level egoic confidence that is rather shallow, and it's not long lasting often because as you try things, you are going to fail. And so that's okay when you can come at it from a genuine sense of, I trust myself to figure it out. I'm really curious about how this is going to work. And I want to look at all the data. I want to see what I can do. Like you take a really innovative approach. And I think that that's where you find a lot of fulfillment in and a lot of joy in. And that's what helps you succeed over and over again. Because I don't think you're really afraid to fail at this point.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable that I would figure it out. Like I wouldn't fail because I would figure it out in the sense, like not like something I wouldn't do. Like I have no doubt that I will have a promo that's a quote unquote failure or it won't go up to my expectations or something. Like it happens. And there's so many factors that are outside of our control too. But like this is why I feel so passionately, like you and I have talked about this many times, but I feel so passionately too about like I think people have been sold a bag of goods in online business that they're supposed to be like super, super passionate about like what they do necessarily. And I always say like I'm very open and honest about the fact that I'm like, do you think I love legal templates? Like who does? I would love to meet that person. They'd probably be dry as a bone. But I'm like, who loves legal? They're like, yes, what I've dreamt about my whole life is drafting a legal template. Like, no. What I really love is, first of all, I love the fact, as you know, and like, first of all, I have this like addiction to being helpful. So this like part of it is that my business like feeds this in a way. But it's like the fact that legal is so like overly complicated and expensive and onerous to so many people. And then like it just so happens to be my like secret sauce that I can break things down in a very simple way, which makes me feel very helpful, which is like my core being of like what I need or what I think I need. And then as Jen knows, and then I get to go see people go out and start their own businesses. And so like I love being this like, we joke about being like a business doula, but I love being like that little part of like what helps people to birth that. That's what I like. And then I really like the pieces of my actual business. Like I really love what I get to do, not like the legal. Like I love marketing. I love doing what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for people, right?
I do too. And I think that you approach it with, we talked about this yesterday when you were talking about, what's the mechanism? You're so interested in how things work, how to make them work, how to figure things out. And that's such a strength that I think a lot of entrepreneurs have to have if they want to not just last and have long-term success, but also enjoy it, because it's always changing. And I think that's where you really shine in that. And that's what I would love I really want you to speak on this too, about this idea of enjoying the process and having fun learning and being a beginner at things. Because that's one area I remember when I started my business. I knew how to do my job and I loved it. And I had no idea how to run a business. I had no idea how to market. I'm still learning all of that. And I've had to learn to love it. I've had to learn to enjoy it. So I know it's a very teachable skill to learn how to love it. But I would really love to hear you speak on where your love for the business building came from and how you might encourage someone to cultivate that within themselves.
Yeah, well, in third grade, I entered an entrepreneurship competition, which is
of course you did.
This is a true story, but you're gonna die when you hear about what I entered for my business. This is the best part. So, because it's like also so me, but also like so baby entrepreneur. So in third grade, Mr. Whitehead, who was the parent of one of the kids in my class, Tom Whitehead, he was a businessman and he came in and like helped the school run this entrepreneurship competition. And I was like, this is it. It's gonna be my big ticket. So I created Sammy's Pizza, which was a pizza shop, which is like
I am not shocked.
Literally, like this is news to no one. And it's like so funny. I love also that I thought this was like an ingenious idea. Like I grew up in New Jersey and like there's a pizza shop, like every other store is a pizza place. So I was like dying laughing, but it just was so funny. Like I remember having to sit down with Mr. Whitehead and like plan out like what was the cost of my flour and like how was I going to hire employees and like how was I going to rent and lease equipment to like build out the kitchen. And I was obsessed with it. And then I started thinking about like how are we going to market this pizza place? Like how are we I created a coupon system and like this whole thing. I was obsessed. So I mean, I think for some people there's like this, you were like kind of like meant to be an entrepreneur and it happens, but I also don't think that that's like the only, the only kind of people that can run their own businesses. But I see like such a beautiful invitation though, when you start an online business to really focus on like what it is about whatever you're doing that you want to do. So like, for example, if you're somebody who really loves podcasting, because like what we're doing right now, this sounds so fun to you. Why are you squeezing yourself onto YouTube if like that doesn't work for you, or like, why are you squeezing yourself into blog writing? You're like, I hate writing. I'm not a good writer. Maybe it's not your thing. Like why don't you let yourself shine a little bit wherever that feels fun to you? And I think the more I didn't do any of these things when I started my business, right? I didn't ever have a podcast or know what that was. I had never written a blog post. I built out my first website. Like I did all of that stuff, and that all just so happened to sound very fun to me. But like maybe there's one part of that does. And I think what I often see is like I see people trying to squeeze themselves into places in their business that it doesn't feel right to them. And so maybe there's some like, I don't know, some natural, like what sounds fun to you? Because I really strongly believe in like whatever sounds fun. It's the same. You and I talk about this. It's the same as exercise, right? It's like if some form of exercise sounds fun, you're going to do it more consistently and have more fun and have better results because of it. It's like versus like forcing yourself to go to CrossFit when you hate CrossFit or something like that.
Right, yeah.
I think it's the same with business. And so like, yeah, it's just that's what's made it very fun to me is like following my nose, like following the scent, of like where was very attractive to me, and then dropping things too when I was like, it's not for me. Like I know that's the quote unquote right thing to do, or I know it would bring me a lot more leads, or this would be successful, but like it's just not that fun to me, and all this other stuff is.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Well, and in that, I'm hearing there's a decent amount of self-knowledge, like you know yourself, you know what you like. There's a lot of self-trust. I'm going to go with my gut. I enjoy this. I'm going to see it through. And I would even say, I think a little bit for you, like an identity piece. And that is something, I think about your exercise example, that when you find something you enjoy and you identify as someone who does this and enjoys it, that is like the goal. That's when you really get somewhere with taking action. And that's a lot of what, the work that I do is figuring out who you are, what you love, trusting yourself, and then really leaning into identifying as the type of person who figures it out, the type of person who is, unstoppable in a way that you have what it takes. And I think that's something that, I think you naturally have some of that already. And there's a lot of people who need to learn how to do that it's going to make or break their success in business.
Do you think people can build this like a muscle?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. None of our identities are not fixed. And, I'm a huge, obviously, believer of continuously getting to know yourself. And that's something that I think is really fun when you talk about your experience when you were in third grade. Like, oh my gosh, also Mr. Whitehead, like how thorough.
Keep meaning to look him up. I keep wanting to like send him my P&L, be like, you'd be so proud.
I was going to ask, have you reached out to him? You should really let him know.
He'd be like, amazing. this girl at our pizza shop.
It's incredible because I'm on the other end of that. I never thought about entrepreneurship. That was not my plan. I fell into it. And so I've had to learn, for me, it's been a learned thing to identify as it. And I think one thing that I see a lot of people struggle with is this idea of I have to be right. I have to get it right. I have to know what I need to do. They confuse clarity with having like the perfect action plan. And that is not often realistic. And so that's one thing that some people I do think naturally gravitate towards that more than others. But I do think it can be learned for sure.
Yeah, it seems like being open to that opportunity. I mean, you and I were talking about this yesterday, actually, of like even coming into online business, like part of, I think our joint concern is that there are some people out there who are marketing this as being something very easy and like automatic and guaranteed. And so then that sometimes attracts people who don't realize like it's still a lot of work. And yeah, and like that's why I always say that like as much as I'm talking about how much fun I have, like please don't get it twisted that things don't go wrong or there aren't days when I want to like throw my computer out the window and all that stuff still exists. It's just that overall I like it so much that it's worth it it's like worth putting up with all that stuff in order to go through it. And so, yeah, like I wanted you to speak about this, like, because I think it is hard for some people to come into this being like, oh, shoot, this is a lot different than I thought.
It is, and it's almost not their fault. And
Right.
I think that we both share similar frustration maybe with
Yeah.
how, and I don't know if it's as marketed as much today as like, oh, it's easy. Like all you have to do is share this, do that, say this, and clients will flood in or customers will flood in, and you can be traveling the world and not having to work
Hmm.
that much. I think that it's done a big disservice, and it's, pros and cons. I think that there's always like, it could be very expansive of like, oh my gosh, I did not know it was possible to do this. And a massive disservice of like, they're not showing you how much work it really does take.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to figure out like, what's worth it to me, and what do I love about this? What's my purpose in this? What's my vision for this that's bigger than myself? Because you're going to need to rely on that when things
Yeah.
do get hard. And you're going to need to know who you are so that you can push through those times. And that's why I think finding the sweet spot between, hustle culture and like, what is soft life or
Hmm.
feminine, where you're just like, it's laid back. We need both, and we just need to find a healthy middle ground and learn how to ebb and flow based on where we are. And I think that's something that people would do really well to learn about themselves and experience. But yeah, figuring out, what do you love about what you do? Like, what makes you passionate about it? What's your why that's bigger than you? And how can you lean into enjoying the process of it, not just the outcomes? Like, you have to enjoy the actions you're taking, or you're going to be miserable, and you might as well do something else that's way less pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I keep finding myself writing about a lot in the book is that, like, if you're not experiencing the success or the results in your business right now, you might be, among many reasons that we discussed throughout the book, but like one of the reasons might be this idea of feeling like you have to love the actual, like, art or work of what you do versus like having a
Mm.
really good business idea too, right? And just being like, what's
Yeah.
actually just a good business idea, and this is smart and I can see how this can work. And then you could be more somebody like me, maybe, who's like, hey, I love like what this job allows me to do. I love my task day to day, but I
Yeah.
don't have to be so passionate about, like, it's not my life's work to do like a legal template.
No, and it doesn't have to be for you to enjoy
Hmm.
it either. I think what fulfills people is finding skills they're really good at, utilizing them, and being appreciated and compensated for them.
Mm.
So I think that as long as your work can, meet that criteria, you're going to be happier, at least more fulfilled. And I mean, I love what I do. I feel deeply connected to the work that I do, to the clients I do. And I would be lying if I said there weren't days where I think, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I doing
Mm.
this? I don't have the energy for it. But they're not many like that, but they're like that. And thankfully, I know well enough to not question my entire existence, or feel like I need to completely pivot. It's just, we're going to have off days. We're human. And you're not always going to be passionate about your work. You're not going to always be passionate about the tasks you have to do. And that's okay, because ultimately, hopefully, your goal, what you really want out of it, is stronger than the frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you're a very good example too of somebody who takes like something you're passionate about. So, in case you don't know already, Jen is an incredible writer. She writes
Mm.
beautifully and like has an incredible newsletter, which you should definitely get. So, I'll make sure I link it down below. But I love it, and that's actually how I became a client of yours. Actually, I read your weekly newsletter and I loved it. And like literally everybody says about every good newsletter or every good piece of content, I was like, if this is what her newsletters are like, then what is it like to work with her? Because these are, I was like, felt transformed from her newsletters, right? But you're an incredible writer, and I know you also like to write personally about things that have nothing to do with business too. But I
Yeah.
think you're a good example of somebody who's like taken something that, first of all, you're naturally very good at, and I know you
Oh,
work at
well.
it, but like
Yeah.
you have
Thanks.
you have natural talent. Let's just put it that way. So you
Oh,
have some raw talent, and then I know you work at it, but also you like, yeah, you integrate that really beautifully into your business, and then I feel like that's what connects so well with others. So like, even if
mhm.
let's say in a different world you didn't love coaching so much, but it's like you're taking something that you do love and you're
Yeah.
integrating it into your business.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example of, I love to write. And, sometimes the way that I actually love to write is very different than I have learned I need to write in my
Yeah.
business. Not that the two do cross over at times, which is fun because storytelling can be a little bit more creative. And I love that. And I understand that there's, copywriting strategies that are effective. And so I want to use those too. So it's a really good exercise for me. But I also really love learning how to write poetry. That I am not good at. And it will probably never see the light of day, which is totally fine by me. But it's a nice example of like, I can have passions outside of my work. In fact, I highly recommend you find them outside of your work. And I'm a part of a poetry membership and love learning about it, love trying it. So it's a really beautiful practice for me. I also really love photography. And there was a point where I was like, I should make a business out of this, like most entrepreneurs do. And then I did a few things that got paid for, and I was like, I actually don't like getting paid for this. I just want to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, and that's it. And so letting myself have these things outside of work that maybe can, weave in occasionally, but don't have to at all. And I can find a lot of fulfillment and creative expression without needing others' validation. And, for you too, I think I love that story about the pizza because I know you love to cook. I know you're really passionate about food. And so it's fun that you indulge in that and find a lot of joy and fulfillment in that and meaning in that, but it's not your business. And so I think that
Yeah.
oftentimes, anytime we try to get everything from one aspect of our life or one person in our life, we are going to be sorely let down. And it's not our job's job to fulfill every single need we have. We're so complex and dynamic. We have a lot of very important needs, and they're worth pursuing outside of work as much as you can. I understand there are different seasons to be able to do that, but yeah, I think that you don't have to love your job, and you can still, or at least be super, super passionate about every aspect of it, and you can be very successful and very fulfilled by it still.
Yeah, I think that is so true. Like, not expecting your business to do all these things. Like, it's a lot of pressure to
Yeah.
put on the business to be like,
Oh,
just like it would be to put on your partner, right? It's like, you're supposed to
yeah.
be all these things for me and provide me happiness and provide me fulfillment and provide me all these things. That's too much pressure for one thing. And
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like, I can see how in our work together over the years too, of like not finding that fulfillment in the business, like, or not only finding my fulfillment in the business and that not being
Yeah.
my only identity, not putting too much of myself into it, and then diversifying myself outside of what I do. And like, at least for me, I don't know if you would recommend this to other people or if this is like universally helpful to other people, but even having some other things that I did outside of business that I didn't share either. Like,
Yes.
that I just kept kind of private. And like, I always recommend to people, and what I write about in the book is that like there's like one or two little like kind of personal aspects of your personality. Like, I love to cook. I'll always be taking pictures of everything I'm eating and cooking, and
Yeah.
that's just, I love doing that. And then I also know that like my audience now really loves that too, and it's kind of built up this
Yeah.
other little like foodie thing, and I love that. So that is like fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But I don't share every single part of my life, and I found that very helpful with separating from it in a healthy way.
I think so. I mean, it's boundaries, right?
Mm.
It's recognizing, and I feel the same with my own life. I think about I want people to know who I am, and to connect with me on similar things that we enjoy. And so it's fun to share those things. But then there are parts of my life that I'm like, you know what, that's sacred, and I don't want to. I don't want to share that, and I don't have to
Mm.
share that, and I can honor that boundary. I think that's really helpful too, because I know for me, I feel like when I'm sharing something, it takes me out of the moment sometimes. It
Mm.
takes me out of the actual experience of it. And I desperately want to fully experience my life. And so that's where I think as we can separate our full identity from our job, it helps because, I'm not in work mode. So why should I share all of this? Because this is not for work. It's for me, my family. It's for, personal things. So I think that creates a healthy barrier to where we might not be so tempted to slip into I am what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, funny enough, you and I worked more on like separating from social media, taking more
Mm-hmm.
breaks, like not working so much, taking more time off social media before this promotion that I just did, and then it
Yeah.
was the largest ever. So like I find that kind of an interesting. Yeah, like what are your insights on that?
I was going to say something about that. I was like, it's been I love how a lot of our work has been, not over identifying with your work and finding things outside of it to enjoy and actually stepping away. And I think that there are a few things in that because I love that you've done that and you've still grown and you've still seen success. You just had your biggest launch after a season where you have stepped away maybe more than ever
Mm-hmm.
before. And I think that there are a few things at play. I think number one, when you diversify your life, your experience, you actually tap into so much more creativity. You become so much more innovative. It's like giving it room to breathe. You step out of it. It changes your perspective. It opens up different parts of your brain. So it actually makes you a smarter, more effective business owner and leader. And so I think that's part of it. I think it allows you to genuinely rest and not just like physically, but the mental, always thinking about it. Oh, I need to post that. I've got to show up. I've got to
Mm-hmm.
knock that out. I have to get this to this person. It kind of quiets that so you can have some genuine stillness and genuine rest and recuperation. And that I think is really important, especially in terms of avoiding burnout, getting really sick of what you do and having like a kind of, quarter life mini crisis
Yeah.
of identity. And so I think that those two things really help. It also, and I'm speaking from what I've seen from you, is it helped you zero in on actual tasks that you need to be doing that no one else can do and took you out of the, menial tasks that you could do technically, but didn't need to. And so it
Mm.
strengthened your ability to delegate and trust your team and have faith that you are supported in your growth and your business and your journey.
I think if anybody currently has like kind of more of a roller coastery relationship, especially with social media, where like that I used to have, where it would go like really hard and like post all the time, do all the stuff, and then you'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't post anything, or I have no ideas left, or I'm just so sick of this app, I don't want to be here anymore, or consuming too much content, not really creating something. And then I
Mhm.
would go back into a promo and do it again, and then be like, oh, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Now I feel like I have more of like what I would describe as an ocean kayaking relationship with
I
with
need you to
social media.
explain that.
Yeah. So okay, if anyone's never been ocean kayaking, this became my mom's thing. Like several years ago, she was like, "Sammy, we're getting ocean kayaks." And then she went out and bought us all ocean kayaks, and it was absolutely hysterical. It's a story for a different day. She got my like very prissy cousin to get in this ocean kayak, and we all told her she was not going to touch the water, and boom, she flipped over within
Oh,
like
no.
2 seconds. Boom, in the water. It was so funny. But
Of
my
course
sister
she
and I
did.
talk about it, yeah, all the time. But with an ocean kayak, you have to hit the wave head on with the nose of the kayak,
Mhm.
and if you do not hit the wave with the nose of the kayak head on, you will flip because it's gravity or whatever. I don't know, whatever physics element is what
Something.
gravity makes
It's a
sense to
wave.
me. Yeah, something about it makes sense. So you really have to keep it. But anyway, then you kind of have like a nice little like bloop like right over the wave, and then you're like bobbing along until the next wave comes, and it's more of like a little wave versus like these huge big roller
Mhm.
coastery crashes. And I feel like that's what's allowed me to like, you and I have been talking a lot lately about we use wave analogies a lot, but like this idea of kind of pulling back like the wave, because
Yeah.
when waves are pulling back, they're gathering up energy. So they're
Yes.
they're pulling up the energy from the ocean floor, and then when the wave is coming in, it is gathering all that energy, and that's what's making it crash. It's making it crest and crash.
Yeah.
And so it's like that, getting more into that mode of like, I don't have to be so high and low. I take every weekend off social media. Like I've just created more of that ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to know for you because I know there's a fear often when there is an ebb. When
Mm-hmm.
there is, I hope that's when the wave recedes, right? When you're
Yeah.
pulling back, there's often this fear of what if another wave doesn't come?
Yeah.
What if it all falls apart? What if I lose everything? What if I lose momentum? And I think that's such a big fear, especially in the online world. And so I'd love for you to share how you overcame that fear, or maybe continually work through that fear when
Mm.
it is ebbing, when the tide's kind of going back for you and you are taking time off and maybe not seeing the results that you would on a normal basis. How do you move through that and trust that another one does come? Because it does. It always does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like there's like a mindset piece and then a strategy piece that's helped, because a mindset piece that you've helped me with is that, like, when I think about that, like, oh, if I don't keep posting, then everyone's going to know I'm gone, or like everything's going to go away or something like this, I kind of now have you in my head all the time, which is both a pro and a con to working with Jen. Is that I'm always like, oh man, I know what Jen would tell me now. So like now I can't get away with it. So I always have her in the back of my mind. She's like the mama bird on your shoulder, like telling you like, no. So I feel like I could hear you in my mind being like, first of all, don't think you're like, you would never say it like this, but like, don't think you're so important in the sense that like everyone's not waiting around for me to be like, what's Sam going to post today? Right? Like there's like a lot of story I think that we built up around this. Like if I don't post today, then like everyone's going to know. If I take a week off, everyone's going to miss me. And then the whole business is going to go out. It's like a lot of drama that we create around it. And so part of it's just been very humbling to be like, nobody cares. Also, I have so much content. Like I've created so many things. And, I have all these other things, and maybe my people are feeling overwhelmed. Like when I was doing 2 podcast episodes a week and 2 emails a week and all these things, I was like, maybe it feels like a lot for me. Maybe it's feeling like a lot for them. So not like, oh, they're all going to miss me. It's like, actually, maybe they'll actually be able to consume and enjoy the content I do create if I slow down a little bit, and they'll appreciate it too. That's also where surveying comes in really handy, by the way, is like ask about how people feel.
Yeah.
I would say so that's like kind of my mindset piece around it, is just thinking, like trusting that I know that I always come back and things work out, but like also just knowing it's not that serious, or like a week, month, whatever it is.
Right. It's not that dire. Yeah.
No, it's not that dire. Yeah. Go ahead.
The piece too, it's so funny because I would never say you're not important.
No, you
are
would.
So important. And none of us are to a degree.
That's like kind of what I mean. I'm kind of like, it's kind of funny when you say it out loud. It's like no one, it's like when people go on Instagram and are like, did everybody miss me? Or sorry, I went, like I ghosted you guys for a week. I was like, you were gone? You're gone. Where'd you go? Yeah.
Well, I think that's why as humans, like we love, I guess I shouldn't speak for every single human in the world, but I know for me,
on behalf of all
on behalf of humanity, I would love to just state that we all love this. That we love being in, I know I love being in nature, surrounded by like something that awes me, that is just like the ocean. It's so huge. Going to a mountain range and hiking, and the mountains are just massive, and it's just like a reminder that, hey, we're so small and not unimportant, and it's not that you don't matter, but the fears that you have, like that, like everyone's watching and gonna think I'm XYZ. No, they're not. That's coming from within you, actually.
Yeah,
that's your own inner fears and projections that you're putting onto other people, which is worth diving into and uncovering that within yourself to give yourself a little bit more freedom. But we do kind of love that reminder that we're so small and it's okay.
Yeah, I actually find it very refreshing, and like this is why you all need to work with Jen, because she can put it way better than I can, because I'm like, that's like what I have in my head. That's what I mean when I say that Jen would never tell me I'm not actually important. I just mean like in general, it like takes the heat off of things. I don't know. But the first time I ever left the country, I was 16. I went to China by myself. Wow. And I went there to play volleyball, and I remember they took us to the Great Wall of China, and that was the first time that I, in my cognitive memory, remember feeling exactly what you're describing, in this almost like laughable, like happy cry moment on the Great Wall of China, looking out into however many miles you could see out into the distance. You could see the wall like rumbling into the mountains. It was gorgeous. And I just remember feeling like a tiniest speck on earth in the best way possible. And that's kind of what I mean in this sense of like bringing some of that feeling of just being like, this stuff doesn't matter. If I need to like take care of myself, or I just wrote an email about this. It's going to go out. Actually, you guys have already gotten this. It's in the future. We're talking in the future. So I just wrote an email. It's going out on March 26th. It's about like taking some of this pressure off to like focus on some of the bigger picture,
Yeah.
which you alluded to earlier of like, I think that was really helpful this year in backing out a little bit to be like, let me focus on some bigger picture stuff. And like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter so much if I'm posting here, there, everywhere.
Right. I think it's interesting to me to think about how it can feel so relieving to feel small. And I wonder if it's because in those moments, like we do feel much smaller, more insignificant, but more deeply connected to something bigger than ourselves, whether
Yeah.
it's just other people experiencing something similar or the earth or, you know, a higher being, whatever. But I wonder if it does that because I think about the other side of that when we feel like all important it is really disconnecting from others.
Hmm.
It's very egoic, and I don't mean that in like a, you know, harsh way, but it's very like, oh, it's all about me, which is what our ego does and is necessary sometimes. But when we get caught up in that, it really just it doesn't allow us to deeply connect. And so I wonder if that's the difference there, why it feels so refreshing.
Yeah, I could imagine. I not to take this in like a different direction, but I was actually thinking of this yesterday as it relates to the launch that we just had in terms of like I think maybe in the past I had more of this attitude and there was more of this ego of like, why aren't these people buying? Like I'm giving
Mm.
and they're not performing for me or or like I'm
How
posting
dare
this thing
they?
and people aren't responding. Like why isn't this working for me? And there was such like more of like an indignancy whereas I don't feel that now, and I definitely have more of that experimenter, like scientist mindset of just being like,
Yeah.
maybe it's because it was a piece of content, I don't know, or the algorithm just didn't show it to anybody. Like there are all kinds
Yeah.
of reasons. I don't take it. It's not about me so much anymore. And like,
Right.
yeah, I thought you'd have insights on this.
Well, I think that's such a freeing thing too, is to be able to take feedback without crumbling.
Mm,
I think that's helpful. I was just talking about this with another client, talking about when someone's giving you feedback, that's gold. You can use that to improve upon, and that's how you reach success. And so, really, yeah, looking at what's working, what's not, and the data points of it it's really helpful to take you out of it to be like it's rarely ever personal. Like
yeah,
no one is trying to personally offend you, some maybe, every now and
yeah,
then, but like that's part of it. But I think that it's not personal. It's really about what's the data say, what's it tell you, how can you make it better, because that mindset of a scientist that you're talking about, that growth mindset of I can improve. I can grow. I don't know everything, and I'm excited to continue learning, which I think can be really helpful when you're applying different strategies. And I know you're going to mention the strategy that helped you kind of overcome the maybe the fears and the ebbs and prepped you
mm-hmm,
for like another wave. And I'd love to hear that because that is a necessary part too. So we have like, this is all the balance of the some would say like the masculine energy and feminine energy of like emotionally I'm taken care of, I'm nurturing myself, and then I'm also being strategic, I'm planning ahead, I'm have strong boundaries with that and protecting these things. And so I'd love to hear that piece
mm-hmm.
for you of like what was that strategy that helped you overcome that fear that really gave you action steps.
Yeah, maybe it's more related to mindset than I initially realized, but I feel like the strategy that I talk about here often, which is like focusing on evergreen content that's like searchable, findable in other places, it has really helped me to adopt that relaxed mindset because I feel like a lot of times I can sit back in the confidence and the comfort that I know that the things I've created are already out there working for me. So maybe it's the cook in me, but I always think of it like marination. It's like
Mm.
if you ever like to marinate, meat or chicken or whatever, it's like you've done the work. Now it's in the fridge, it's marinating. Like there's nothing else you can do. It's like working its little magic in there and tenderizing the meat and doing all the things.
Yeah.
And you're out, you can do whatever you need to do. That's kind of how I think about this. So I'm like, well, I've created, I don't know, at this point, 200 something podcast episodes. I've worked tirelessly to title them in a way, to write show notes in a way, to optimize those show notes, to
Yeah.
have our blog posts, like to have all of these things. I have YouTube videos, all of this stuff that I know is out there working for me. So it's like at some point, what's going to be enough? Like, I don't know. It's kind of like
Yeah.
depositing money into your like money market account or something like this.
Yeah.
It's like you put it in and then it grows. So you can like, that's the whole point. You like sit back. So if you're not taking advantage of that, what's the point?
Well, and that's the beauty of long-term investment. And that's exactly what evergreen content is. And what is often, I think, in this day and age, really challenging to focus on because you don't get, and I know you're really experiencing this right now, not to call you out,
Yeah.
but
We were talking about this yesterday.
yeah, but you don't get immediate validation. You don't know if it's working immediately when you're doing a YouTube video or when you're, creating a podcast episode. It's not like you're putting something on Instagram. You created it in an hour, it's done and dusted, and you're going to see how people respond to it. You don't get that immediacy. And so there it takes I'm curious for you because you started out thinking long term, which is
Yeah.
really smart. But thinking about, SEO and how can this work for me in the future? How can I plan long term, set myself up for success long term, knowing that I might not see immediate gratification and rewards, but trust the process that it's going to get better. That's a big piece that a lot of people I think are missing. And as social media changes and evolves, and as it always does, like I think it's more important now more than ever and more challenging now to make ourselves focus on that. I'm curious your thoughts on because you have a ton of content.
Yeah.
You are unique in how much you can create and produce and put out. And so I love what you said earlier about finding something you enjoy doing and sticking with that. But yeah, I think that focusing on the long term and having your sight set there is critical to navigating like and it's a long-term thing. So I'm curious too for you mindset wise, what helps you focus on that when you're not getting immediate rewards, especially as you're writing a book right now.
Yeah, I know. I was just telling Jen yesterday that I'm like, man, I'm writing the book. I'm not on social media right now, so I'm not seeing anything about it's stuff still being posted, but I don't get that little like dopamine hit to see what's happening. Like it's like I feel like I'm in a detox. It's really interesting, but it's really tough. But I think like, I had a friend tell me years ago that when I was questioning my strategy of like, hey, I had this idea to like kind of my idea, and as I've mentioned here before, is that essentially with something more like SEO, with being on YouTube where you can like be, search for, someone can find you. My idea there is just as simple as like people are literally looking for you. So like, why not just position yourself in front of it? Like someone's typing into Google or whatever what they're looking for. Why not put yourself there? Like I don't see. It's just like that seems like a no brainer to
Well, and
me.
that's
Yeah,
such a belief too. People are
yeah,
looking for you. And
yeah. I
that's
guess that's
one
true.
that I
Hmm.
see some other entrepreneurs struggle with. Like, who's going to want my services? That's often like an unconscious or sometimes very conscious thought. Like, who's going to want to work with me? There are so many other people out there. And so having that belief that there's someone out there searching for you, you have to like put yourself in position for them to find you. I love that.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's like the judgmental harsh Scorpio in me, but like I remember going and seeing that there were other people offering things and then being like I could do this different. I could do this
Yeah.
better. Like not even in a cocky way of just literally of seeing like an opportunity that there was something missing. And
Yeah.
this is what I spent a lot of time writing in the book is like really taking the time to do the research, whether it's about a product that you want to create or about
Mhm.
an entire business you want to create, but taking that time to be like, what is already there? Is there demand already for this? Is there
Yeah.
proof of concept? Is there supply? Like meaning there are other people doing what you're doing. Don't take that as a deterrent. That is actually proof that this thing
Yeah.
works, but what is missing, right? And where
Yeah.
are you different and unique? And then like just hone in on that. Go in and be different.
Yeah. And that's everything you just said, those questions, that point of view with business is so teachable. And people, like, I would say, take notes on that and follow that, apply that to everything that you're doing and looking to build. Because it's so true. It's just about how can I make this work? There's this underlying belief that, I can do that. They can do that. I can do that too. And I love that. that level of comparison can be healthy, can be helpful at times. And, I'm really curious for you, because I know you, when you started your first business, it quote unquote failed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you came into this one, and I would love to hear you speak on how you mentally, emotionally overcame that failure or moved through that failure and shifted in a way that was really, really brilliant and led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so Jen's referring to the fact that I had a health coaching business first. I started that in 2016 when I first left the law firm, and I primarily wanted to teach people how to cook. Again, see, trying to make your passion a business. Yeah, so that is that. See, I'm a walking example of why it doesn't always work. Sometimes your passion does, but so. Yeah, it's funny because one part of why I think I was able to turn that like failed experience into a very successful one pretty quickly with the legal business is probably something that doesn't come from a great place, and something that you and I have talked about a lot before, which is this like feeling like I have to have my back up against a wall in order to really perform, right?
Yes.
So I felt even though it was not actually true, like had I been working with Jen at the time, I would have known that this was a story and I was perfectly safe and I was fine, but I felt like it was do or die for me. And I was like, I thought that when I left the law, that was it. Like I had bet on my one pivot, right? And so like my pivot was starting a health coaching business. That didn't work. I was like, oh shit, like I need to make this work. Like not only is it making me look bad, but I was terrified about money. I remember I had like nothing left in my health coaching business account. And so I took like $100. I put that into my Sam Vander Wielen LLC account and started a bank account with that $100. That's all I had. And I was like, I'm going to have to make it work. And I thrive, I don't recommend this for anyone, but I thrive or have thriven.
I've thriven.
Thriven in the
that
past.
Feels like 1800 language.
I know, it feels like ACOTAR.
I have thriven.
I have thriven in the pasteth before I worked with Jenneth.
The King James version of Sam's podcast.
I know. I've thriven in the past in that position. I no longer operate in that way, but I did at that time. Yeah. And then I would say applying this, like what you and I have been talking about in this episode of like, the health coaching thing gave me the opportunity to see all these little pieces. Like I said, I literally wouldn't have known like what is an email list, like what's an email blast, as people used to call it. Like I didn't know any of this stuff. And so when my eyes were a little bit like awoken to these things, it was like, wait a minute, I really like this. So now I want to like take this and go apply it over here, which I think is a really good business idea. And I applied everything that I'm writing about in the book, but I very much was operating from that place of like hunger.
Yeah, and I would challenge your thriveth.
Yes, my thriving, my thriving nature.
Yeah, I think that, and I've seen a lot of people actually create culturally successful things as a response to trauma, stress, scarcity. And the trouble is the effect that has on our nervous systems over time. And so while on one hand, you really can trust that you're going to take care of yourself when your back is against the wall because you did. And so you can absolutely trust yourself in that. And that would give me a lot of, confidence and courage. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be built that way. You can work hard without feeling like my back's against the wall. It's do or die, like having that extra pressure on yourself. And I know that's something that we've worked with a lot because you got to a place and you're like, I don't want this to be my existence. And sometimes we, don't always make the healthiest choices as a result of that. Not saying that you haven't, but I think that's worth, noting and saying, for you, I think it's brave to look at what you've built and how you've built it and to kind of say, I'm really grateful for that version of me. I really can trust that if I need her, she can still show up. And I want to maintain this and continue to grow this in a new way. That takes a lot of courage to shift that. Which you have been doing really boldly. And I'm excited to see you continue to do that so that you feel how you want to feel and can see that growth and abundance and success can still happen even when your back
Yeah.
is maybe, on a cushier surface.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got
I
plenty of
feel like,
space.
yeah, exactly. I'm definitely more trusting now that like things will be okay, things will work out. I also think I've readjusted. Like, I feel like this is not a popular opinion in our space, but especially when we started our businesses, there was just like so much noise around this, like making 80,000 figures a minute and like all this stuff. And as I always say, like
24
and
figure months.
yeah, 24 figure months and like buying a G Wagon. It was like the whole thing. It was like a whole, and there was like so much bro marketing. And I hope
Yeah.
that's calming down. I actually don't really know because I don't consume it anymore. But I feel like it was very popular. And I definitely had also this like reckoning of like, what is enough? And like, what's enough for
Yeah.
me? Like, I get to define that. I don't need to just keep, like, why is it that your business has to keep growing? I mean, if I want it to grow, great. But also, am I just growing to grow or because I think that's what you have to do? What does that even mean? What does growing mean to me? Does it mean more customers? Does it mean more profitable? Does it mean just more revenue, but I'm lower profit? Like, there's a lot of room for interpretation there. And so really stepping back and like allowing myself to start asking, what does that mean to me? Or what do I want?
That question is that, what do I want? And also asking yourself, being bold enough to ask yourself, why do I want what I want?
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing because sometimes ambition, it has a shadow side. It's not always going to lead you to more fulfillment, to happiness, to a better life. And you think it might, but it won't if it's not checked.
Yeah.
And we want to keep that in check so that we're more, aligned with what you actually value, what you genuinely want. In your life, what you want to experience. And that I think is worth asking yourself is like, when is it enough? And when are you fulfilled? And how will you know? And why do you want what you want? I love that question. And to be very honest with it. And there are times that I think I know for me in my own life, there are things that I want and I'm like, but my ego really wants it.
Right.
My persona really wants it, and I don't want to let go of it. I want to really attach myself to it because it means something to me. And the more I can kind of release my grip and question it and hold it and recognize like that isn't me, especially when we're talking about material things,
Yeah.
that's not me. Like I can't put my soul in that. That's cool if you really genuinely enjoy it and like it, amazing. But don't do it to please others. Don't do it to, try to continue to cultivate this ego of what you think you should want or who you should be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. I think that it'd be really cool for people to hear from you. Like, you've been through a lot of launches with a lot of different people with different businesses and different desires and values and hopes and dreams. So like, and size businesses and all that kind of stuff. What are some common themes you've seen? Not necessarily of like, what are the 3 things that make the launch most successful, but in the mindsets of CEOs who go into things, like what are some common themes you see in the most successful CEOs that you work with?
The most successful ones, and I'm going to define success with fulfillment, growth, and, maybe not the top outcome, but the outcome where they're excited for the next one. What I see in them is they are very excited to learn. They can't wait to get to the other side of it and see what worked, what didn't. Like they're so excited to try and then look and see what they can learn from the experience. They also think about serving when they're selling. They're thinking about, this isn't about me. It's about my customer. It's about my client. It's about my greater mission. And when I can focus on inviting the right people into my offer, into my service, and trust that this is like the right people are going to come in and I can learn how to better speak to them. After I look at this, they have such good responses. The third thing I would say is that their goals are very action based. So they're looking at, am I serving really well? I'm looking at growth and what I can learn from this experience so that I know I can just get better and apply it. And then I'm also just really enjoying the process of this. And I know, it's going to be, okay with whatever happens. They're not completely attached. And so they're very focused on, I'm I'm really showing up and taking action. Like I know that these are my goals. I'm sending X amount of emails. I'm
Mm-hmm.
showing up and doing this. I'm going to, put on my master class this many times, and I'm going to judge my success off of my actions, not my results. That will,
Mm.
we'll look at those at the end of the launch and then assess where things could improve and what went well, which is something that you said to me after this really big launch. You were like, I'm just so excited. It was really fun. It went really well. And honestly, like, I can't wait to do the debrief because I already know there are things we can improve on. And I like can't wait to apply that. I can't wait to get
Yeah.
better for the next one. That mentality will change everything. Like launches don't have to be miserable if you focus on those three things.
Yeah, absolutely. And pro tip, by the way, if you're doing a promo sometime soon, like keep a note somewhere. Like we use Asana, so I create a note at the start that's like a debrief note. And as the launch is going, I'm literally like adding to that note throughout the day. Like, must do this, stop doing this, let's do this next time. Like we forgot to do this. Because I would, if you asked me today, I wouldn't remember, but I go back and I look at my list and I'm like, oh yeah, thank goodness I wrote that down.
Right.
But that really helps. But it's really helpful to hear, like what I'm taking away from what you're sharing is that like loving the process, well, maybe not even loving it, but being open to the process and like really even just seeing it. Like I think what's refreshing in hearing what you're saying is like seeing this as a process, like that this is
Yeah.
not something that you start and it's easy, or it's not something you start and you're
No.
supposed to be automatically good at, or that you deserve necessarily like off the start. Like we work for
Yeah.
it. We have to earn
Yes.
people's trust. We have to like, establish ourselves, like work for our audience. We have to make an actually good product that helps people so that more
Yeah.
people want to buy it. Like there's work involved, but I think like having that mindset that like I'm here for the long haul. So I understand that there's going to be like a lot of room for improvement and growth,
Yeah.
and being open to that.
I think that underlying all of those things, the ability to look at that is this: you have to have this belief that you are ultimately going to succeed
Mm,
long term, and you're willing to do what it takes, and not in a, hustle culture type way, bro marketing, but you're willing to learn, you're willing to look ridiculous, you're willing to
yeah.
try, you're willing to be a beginner, like knowing my success is inevitable because I trust myself, because I know I can learn, I know I can create a really great product, maybe not out of the gate. That, isn't common. So, okay, I don't expect these ridiculous things of myself. I'm not entitled to success, but I trust myself enough to know that I can do the work and I can create it. And then focusing on the actions over and over again on what you can control, what you can do, which, I know in your launch, you had a huge tech issue.
Yep. Yeah,
And
I was going to ask you about that because we had a really big, so we offered 2 live webinars. The first live webinar was a complete disaster in terms of the tech. It wasn't working. My screen wasn't working. People couldn't hear me, couldn't see me. It was a whole thing. For the second one, we actually ended up switching platforms, using an entirely different platform. So like in the middle of the night, we like switched all the links. Thank goodness, by the way, for ConvertKit, you can go back into emails and change links that you've sent out. Like thank
so
goodness,
smart.
because we redirected people automatically. But that impacted our sales heavily. And this was
Mhm.
something I wanted to talk with you about because it was something that I noticed a big difference in myself, that in the past, when I've had launches that weren't going as well as I thought, or like you would have a couple quiet days, I would start coming up with all kinds of stories like, this is it, no one's buying, it's already over. And then what I would do is stop showing up on social media. I'd kind of
Yes.
like pull back, get quiet, and then almost like self-fulfill exactly what I was, was laying out for me. And there were I mean, first of all, the first day of our promo was quieter, way quieter than it should have been because of this tech issue.
Yeah.
And then always in the middle of a launch, and I talk about this in the first episode of the series, there's always going to be a period where things get a little quieter, especially if you're doing like a fast action and then a closed cart. And like for ours, it fell over the weekend. And so I just felt very relaxed over the weekend. I almost felt like I was giving everybody like a mutual break. I was kind of like, I know I've been hitting you hard with the promo stuff. I feel tired too. So like I posted one time on stories each day on Saturday, Sunday, and then I was out. I was like, I'm gonna go take the rest of the day, be in nature, be off of this. I know everybody else needs a break too.
Yeah.
And then I'll like get back to it on Monday. And we went hard for like the last 3 days, and everything was more than fine. It was great.
Yeah.
So that was a huge difference this time around.
What do you think helped you go from in the past when you may have, stopped showing up and really kind of started telling all those stories to yourself to this time? Really, I mean, you handled it. That's my favorite win of yours
Yeah,
from
it was
that
funny.
entire launch, honestly. It was when you shared, this happened, and I'm so proud of how I handled it. I want to know what's different about you now versus then.
I wish you all could see it because it was so funny when the first webinar was just going so badly. And I went to drama camp for 10 years as a kid, every single summer. And I'm like, I pulled out all the things I remembered from drama camp. I like made my voice more animated, and then I would go like up and down. And then I would take pauses, like all these things I've learned in public speaking. And because I had to make up for the fact that no one could see anything. It was just so funny. So there was that whole thing, which was hysterical. But I think that I've done the whole launch thing where I didn't feel like it was going that great, and I started throwing a pity party / temper tantrum in the middle of it, and then just sunk my own boat. And I've done that many times. I've seen other people do it. And then I don't know, somewhere along the way, maybe it was that like I had a promo where I was like, you know what, I'm going to commit to like consistent energy throughout this. And I saw that, yes, I had those like quiet days or things slowed, and then all of a sudden it picked up. So I kind of bought into that whole, like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you don't know when
Right.
this is going to pick back up. I also understand buying behavior more, now, and can kind of like trust in that when like people buy when there's like this deadline. It's just like sales psychology. And so there was like this deadline, and then the deadline got a little longer. So everybody took a break, and then everybody bought again right before
Yeah.
the deadline. So I understood how that worked. And I just decided ahead of time to mentally commit. Like, I'm going to show up every day throughout this promo, regardless of how it's going. And I do think you have to, I'm not trying to promote this mentality, but I once heard a dietitian say that you should decide how you feel about how you weigh, like how much you weigh before you ever step on a scale. And I thought that was like a very interesting like mindset, to not let you stepping on the scale dictate how you feel about your
Dictate it.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of like, I like that in terms of how I think about my business. Like I'm not going to let what's happening day to day in the promo dictate how I feel about this promotion and how I show up for it. I've just decided ahead of time, I'm showing up like this consistently throughout, and that's it. And then I would just finally tell people that like you also have to get really good at biting onto like any little piece of momentum you can. If you get a nice DM or a nice email or one purchase, like you have to celebrate every little thing, because it starts to feel bigger and bigger to you. And then I also think that momentum and energy very well translates to other people and impacts your sales.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that, you're kind of reverse engineering the storytelling in
Yeah.
your mindset of, instead of focusing on the negative, which we are wired to do, we have to make a concerted effort to focus on the positive, but really focusing on what is working, what can you control. You're showing up and you're committing to own, this launch, own your energy, own how you show up. That's what we can control. We cannot control the tech. We can't control, even the results to an extent. So focus on what you can, and that's your job for launching, is focusing on how you're showing up, your energy, and being able to be emotionally and mentally resilient when things don't happen. And you have the benefit of wisdom and knowledge that have helped you learn that, which I do think is very important and worth, listening to. A lot of clients that I have worked with, not all, but some, when they first launch, I encourage them, maybe suggest that, why don't you wait until the end of the launch to look at all your data to
Yeah.
look at your email opens and click rates and stuff like that, because it's the first time you're doing this. What I don't want you to do is get so, roped into, well, no one's signing up yet. No one's signing up yet, when you just started
Yeah, you're just
this.
starting.
Yeah, like we need you to show up fully and focus on the people who will sign up, or who you're speaking to, who you're continually warming up, so that your energy stays high. Because people can, I mean, it's palpable. How you're showing
Yes.
up is always palpable. Communication, I think it's, what is it? 92% of it is not, or 7% is verbal. The rest
Yeah.
is tonality, it's body language, it's energy, essentially. And so it matters. And so protecting that in those moments when you're very, like what you did, you were very
Yeah.
animated, and you rolled with that so well. Really tackled that obstacle um, beautifully.
Oh, thanks. The hype is so important, like Jen's saying, it that translates so well. And like I'm not encouraging anyone to manufacture it, but there are
No.
ways to look for it more, to like really have that mindset of like, I want this, I want to absorb this, and then like roll with it. So for example, when people, like someone would DM me and they would be like, I just bought the bundle, just want to say thanks, like bye. It was like kind of, just a short thing. I
Yeah.
would instantly, or when I saw it, I would voice memo them back and I would say, thank you. Like, Jen, thanks so much. Thanks for telling me. I am so excited for you. Like, I would be
Yes.
excited because I also genuinely was. And then I would say, how does it feel? Right. And then they would
Yeah.
come back to me and be like, it actually feels so great. I'm so relieved. I'm so happy I found you. And then this gave me not only like such positive energy, but then I was sharing that with other people, and like it
Yeah.
all just started to snowball, I felt like.
Well, and that goes back to kind of what we are talking about, you're not important. It's connection. It's, viewing each client, each customer that's coming in as a human, respecting that, honoring that, seeing them in that, and not a number, and feeling what an honor that we get to do this type of work, that we get to
Yeah.
make an impact in the way that we do. Every single person matters, and is, connected with us enough to trust us to invest. And I think that taking that's something I don't mess around with. I feel like taking that very seriously, honoring that, respecting that is really helpful to keep us in check too. That kind of what you were saying earlier, how you would think like, why is nobody buying this product? What's like, why that's entitlement. And we hate that idea. It's very shadowy. It's not comfortable. No one wants to be entitled, but yet we can be at times. And so it's helpful to recognize, all right, if I can put my entitlement down and focus on each individual person that I would love to welcome into this, that I would love to serve, that I've created this for, that I hope to impact, it is it just changes the way that we feel about what we do. It changes the way that we show up and sell. It really is I think a way more beautiful thing. And people can tell. People
Hmm.
know when they're appreciated and when they are just another number coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's a great like place for us to wrap up today, is like our my Olive Garden, as you know, I call it my Olive Garden theory of like, once you're here, you're family. So like I
Yeah.
really do treat people like, cool, now you're part of the crew. Like, thanks so much. Come on in. I mean, that's what I was saying. People, it's like, welcome to the community. I'm so happy you're like
Yeah.
part of our crew now. And it feels that way, but I genuinely feel that way. And I I do think that that kind of stuff will sell more of your product than
Yeah.
any like strategy. I could give you a tip because,
Yes.
a friend telling another people in their group, or they're in a coaching program, they tell them about your product or something. It's always going to work better for you than you
Yeah.
trying to sell to everyone.
Well, word of mouth, your reputation, that always matters. And in
Yeah.
the long game, always matters, and is important to think about. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
absolutely.
You do a beautiful job of that, and how much you do serve your clients and customers and even audience with all the information you put out to be helpful. Everyone, we're all, me included, are very, very fortunate to know you and to be able to connect with you here.
Oh, thank you. Well, to bring it full circle, I think it's easy when you really love what you do. So it's like, I love doing this. And like, I am bursting at the seams with creative ideas every day. And like, I think that's because I genuinely enjoy what I'm
Yeah.
doing. So I think that stuff really works, guys. That's what I'm going to say.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love for you to tell people not only where to find you, but if you have something for them, what's like a best next step if they're now equally as obsessed with you as I am and they were like, I want to be now in her circle, where can they find you?
That's very kind. Yes, you can find me on my website at jenniferdiaz.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there as well. I send out a Monday mindset newsletter with some tips from me on mindset, business, video, journal prompts, and you can also find me on Instagram at Jen M Diaz.
Cool. I'll link to everything below.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being back. Thanks for being my first
Well,
repeater.
I'm very honored. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Terms podcast. Make sure to follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can also check out all of our podcast episodes, show notes, links, and more at samvanderwielen.com/podcast. You can learn more about legally protecting your business and take my free legal workshop, 5 Steps to Legally Protect and Grow Your Online Business at samvanderwielen.com. And to stay connected and follow along, follow me on Instagram at samvanderwielen and send me a DM to say hi. Just remember that although I am an attorney, I am not your attorney, and I am not offering you legal advice in today's episode. This episode and all of my episodes are informational and educational only. It is not a substitute for seeking out your own advice from your own lawyer. And please keep in mind that I can't offer you legal advice. I don't ever offer any legal services, but I think I offer some pretty good information.